Behind the badge, corruption festered. The police department turned law into a weapon, driving families from their homes under the guise of justice. They didn't strike at random. They hunted carefully, targeting black and minority homes. But one night, they picked the wrong house. To them, Tyrone Carter was just another name on a falsified warrant, another black man they could frame, brutalize, and erase. But they never could have imagined he was a Navy SEAL. So they kicked in his door. They stormed his home, weapons drawn, ready to make an example of him. They vandalized, humiliated, planted evidence, fully believing they were in control. By the time they realized their mistake, Tyrone Carter was already fighting back. They thought the system would protect them. They thought no one would ever fight back. But this time, the system won't save them, because Tyrone Carter isn't running, and justice is coming for them all. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe. The evening sun cast its golden glow across the neatly trimmed lawns and quiet streets of Maplewood Heights, illuminating each pristine home that stood in silent rows, a neighborhood appearing peaceful yet secretly marred by unseen divisions and prejudice. Tyrone Carter leaned against his porch railing, his powerful arms crossed as his thoughtful gaze settled upon a distant point, memories of past missions and camaraderie mingling with the reality of civilian life, a life he hoped would provide him the calm he had fought so fiercely to protect. But the stillness was deceptive, and beneath the comforting routine lay an unease he couldn't quite place, something subtle, sinister, an undercurrent that whispered he didn't belong here. Not entirely. Since his honorable discharge from the Navy SEALs, Tyrone had sought nothing but simplicity and peace, returning home to rebuild a quiet existence in the modest, welcoming home he had carefully restored with his own hands. The wooden floors, fresh paint, and the carefully arranged pictures of family and friends, each detail symbolized his hard-fought return to normalcy. Yet, every now and then, the shadow of suspicion crept upon him, whether it appeared as an accusing stare from passing police cars, the uncomfortable questions from neighbors, or the unsettling silence following his greetings to some in town who refused to acknowledge him simply because he was different, because his very presence challenged their perceptions. Tyrone had learned to endure such prejudice silently, maintaining his dignity and calm composure, his military training having taught him that restraint often spoke louder than retaliation. But tonight felt different, charged with an unsettling energy as dusk faded into a darkening sky, a warning of stormy clouds gathering in the distance. He watched carefully as a marked patrol car slowly cruised by, headlights illuminating shadows, eyes lingering too long on his home before moving on down the street. Tyrone's jaw tightened slightly, a flicker of instinct urging him to remain vigilant, aware yet still uncertain of what danger lurked beneath the surface. Turning back inside, he locked the door securely behind him, taking in the comforting scent of polished wood and fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen, an aroma that always reminded him of simpler times. He moved with deliberate ease, checking windows and doors instinctively, driven by a feeling he could neither explain nor dismiss. A sudden noise outside, subtle yet distinct, caused his muscles to tense, his keen senses alerting him immediately that something was wrong. Outside his home, shadows moved silently, officers whispering commands, gripping weapons with sweaty palms and ill intentions. A squad of officers, faces concealed behind riot gear and masks, moved stealthily into position, eyes narrowed and hearts hardened by prejudice, utterly unaware that the man they were targeting was no ordinary civilian, but a seasoned warrior. Their intention was clear: to frighten, humiliate, and break him. But they were blind to the truth that would soon confront them. Inside, Tyrone paused, his instincts sharpening as he registered the sound of heavy boots shuffling quietly in formation, shadows flickering across the window shades. He tensed, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat preparing him for a battle he never sought but would never flee from. They had chosen the wrong house, and soon they would understand their mistake. Tyrone's senses sharpened instantly as the quiet night exploded into chaos. Glass shattered violently as tear gas canisters crashed through the windows, their choking white smoke instantly clouding the air and filling his living room with a harsh chemical sting. His eyes burned fiercely, yet his military instincts kicked in without hesitation, driving him to the floor where he quickly shielded his face, breathing controlled and steady even amid the turmoil. Seconds later, the front door splintered violently under a heavy boot, breaking inward to reveal Officer Brad Tanner, flanked by 3 other officers, their faces hidden behind riot masks, bodies covered in tactical gear. Tanner swung his baton fiercely, knocking furniture out of his path as he entered aggressively. "Police! Nobody move!" Tanner roared unnecessarily, deliberately smashing Tyrone's belongings as he advanced through the room. "What is this about?" Tyrone shouted clearly, rising slowly to his feet, hands raised defensively but standing firm. His voice remained calm despite his anger, powerful and controlled in the face of blatant hostility. "Show me your warrant," Tanner laughed coldly, contempt obvious even through the heavy mask. "We don't need one for a thug like you. You know exactly why we're here." "No," Tyrone replied sharply, still composed, but clearly outraged. "I don't. This is illegal. You have no warrant, no probable cause. You're violating my rights." "Rights?" Tanner mocked, stepping forward until he stood inches from Tyrone's face, hostility radiating off him like heat. "You people always think you've got rights, but you don't belong here, Carter. We're cleaning up this neighborhood." Tyrone stared directly into Tanner's eyes, unflinching. "I belong here just as much as you. More, even. I actually served this country. You're supposed to uphold the law, not break it." Tanner bristled visibly beneath his gear, anger flaring at Tyrone's defiance. Behind him, Officer Kyle Simmons hesitated slightly, recognizing the tension was quickly spiraling out of control. "Tanner, maybe we—" "Shut it!" Tanner snapped, silencing Simmons instantly before turning back to Tyrone. "You want to resist arrest? Go ahead. Give me an excuse." "Arrest for what?" Tyrone demanded, his voice steady despite the rage pulsing through him. "You came into my home without justification. I'm not going anywhere." "Suit yourself," Tanner sneered, signaling with a swift nod to his team. Immediately, the officers began methodically vandalizing Tyrone's belongings, deliberately breaking furniture, smashing pictures from the walls, scattering cherished medals and awards onto the floor. Each crash intensified Tyrone's anger, testing his discipline. "Stop this!" Tyrone shouted sharply, stepping toward the officers as they ripped apart his living room. "This is my home. You have no right." Officer Simmons paused again, looking briefly uncomfortable before smashing a lamp to the ground, clearly conflicted yet obeying orders. Tanner turned back, enjoying the scene of destruction. "We're just getting started. When we're done, you'll have nothing left. Maybe you'll finally understand you aren't welcome here." Tyrone clenched his fists, fighting the urge to physically intervene, knowing the consequences of violence. "You think you're untouchable, but I promise you, people will see what you're doing here." "Who do you think they'll believe, Carter? A decorated cop? Or some troublemaking outsider?" Tanner sneered bitterly, deliberately knocking down a cherished photograph from Tyrone's days in uniform, glass shattering loudly upon impact. Tyrone's heart surged with indignation, and his voice turned ice-cold, every word laced with quiet fury. "I fought for justice once. I'll fight for it again, right here." "Oh, you want to fight?" Tanner challenged, stepping closer, baton ready in hand, clearly eager for a confrontation. "Go ahead. Give us a reason." Tyrone's muscles tensed, recognizing the immediate threat. He took a deliberate breath, steadying himself, understanding clearly that his peaceful approach had reached its limit. The line had been crossed. He would no longer stand idly by. "I didn't want this," Tyrone said, a final attempt at reason in his voice. "But I won't let you get away with this injustice." Tanner smirked beneath his mask, eager for the confrontation, confident in his numbers. "Show me what you've got, boy." Tyrone took a controlled step back, positioning himself strategically as the officers encircled him, their aggression clear. Adrenaline surged through his veins, honed reflexes readying for the inevitable clash. Understanding he had no choice now but to fight. He didn't vanish or retreat. Instead, Tyrone stood strong, eyes narrowed, focused, prepared to confront these corrupt men head-on. They might have started this war, but he would finish it. Tanner's voice cracked sharply through the tension-filled air, echoing off the walls of Tyrone's vandalized home. "We've got a warrant for a narcotics search, Carter. You better stand down before things get ugly." Tyrone's eyes narrowed sharply, instantly realizing the gravity of Tanner's words. This was no random raid, but a calculated operation built on lies meant to tarnish his reputation and destroy everything he'd carefully built. He knew for certain there were no drugs in his house, nothing illegal whatsoever. But the planted evidence would make it seem otherwise. Tanner wasn't just here for him. He was here to erase him completely. "That's impossible," Tyrone responded firmly, steadying himself into a defensive stance. His voice radiated authority and defiance, his tone low but clear. "You're fabricating this entire thing. I know what you're doing, and I won't let it happen." Tanner's eyes flashed angrily behind his mask, his posture aggressive as he barked another order. "Take him down! He's resisting arrest." The officers advanced immediately, spreading out tactically around him, clearly trained but utterly unaware of Tyrone's true capabilities. Tyrone rapidly assessed the situation. 4 officers, 1 hesitant, the rest aggressive, and 1 primary threat, Tanner, who was clearly orchestrating this malicious attack. The first officer rushed forward recklessly, baton raised to strike. Tyrone reacted instantly, stepping inward to close distance, seizing the man's wrist with fluid precision, swiftly twisting his arm into a controlled lock. The officer's baton clattered uselessly to the floor as Tyrone pivoted, smoothly throwing him onto a nearby couch, where he landed heavily, dazed but unharmed. "Back off!" Tyrone shouted sharply, eyes locked on Tanner. "Nobody needs to get hurt." "Too late for that!" Tanner snarled viciously, signaling 2 more officers to approach simultaneously, attempting to flank Tyrone from both sides. Tyrone breathed steadily, his training guiding every controlled movement. He dropped low, avoiding a baton swing aimed at his head from the left. Grabbing the officer's arm mid-swing, he used the man's momentum to redirect him into his partner, sending both sprawling awkwardly onto the broken coffee table, shattering wood and glass in a loud crash. Tanner's fury intensified, his confidence shaken as he realized Tyrone was far more skilled than he'd anticipated. "He's trained! Take him seriously!" he shouted urgently, finally acknowledging the threat Tyrone posed. Officer Simmons hesitated, his eyes darting nervously toward Tanner. "This isn't right, Tanner. Maybe we should pull back." "Stay focused, Simmons," Tanner yelled harshly, gripping his baton tighter. "He's dangerous." "I'm defending myself," Tyrone countered sharply, voice clear, authoritative, still holding his defensive position. "You've come here to ruin me, and I won't stand for it." "You're resisting a lawful order," Tanner roared, rushing forward himself, baton swinging in a wide, powerful arc, aimed squarely at Tyrone's chest. Tyrone smoothly dodged the reckless blow, catching Tanner's extended arm, twisting it sharply, then driving his palm firmly into Tanner's midsection, knocking the wind from him. Tanner stumbled back, gasping for breath, eyes wide with shock at being outmatched so decisively. "Enough!" Tyrone warned again, stepping back into a defensive stance. "Walk away from this right now." But Tanner's pride refused to concede defeat. Furious and desperate, he reached for his radio, voice strained yet venomous. "Back up! Suspect violent! Officer down! We need immediate backup!" Tyrone knew he had little time before reinforcements arrived. He had momentarily neutralized the immediate threats, but escaping cleanly, had become nearly impossible. More than that, he needed answers. Why him? Why now? Officer Simmons stood shakily, eyes conflicted, as he pointed his baton nervously toward Tyrone. Listen, Carter. Just stop fighting. We'll figure this out. Tyrone's voice softened slightly, eyes locked firmly onto Simmons, sensing an opportunity. You know this is wrong, Simmons. You can stop this. But before Simmons could respond, Tanner, breath regained, barked aggressively, Simmons, do your job. Now! The hesitation vanished, replaced by nervous compliance as Simmons raised his baton once again, joining Tanner as they prepared for another assault. Tyrone steadied himself, readying for the next wave of confrontation, resolved now to see this through to the end. This fight wasn't finished yet. It had only just begun. Tyrone stood firmly in the wreckage of his home, eyes sharp and alert, breathing controlled as he calculated every move the officers around him could possibly make next. The initial silence following Tanner's call for backup was swiftly broken by sounds of approaching sirens echoing faintly in the distance, promising reinforcements that would soon flood into his peaceful neighborhood, turning it into an unwanted battleground. You've made a huge mistake, Carter, Tanner hissed bitterly, stepping forward again cautiously, his baton raised in readiness. This ends badly for you, one way or another. You attacked me in my own home, Tyrone responded fiercely, maintaining his ground, his stance balanced and poised, prepared for the next attack. I didn't start this, but I will finish it. Tanner lunged forward suddenly, baton slicing through the air, vicious intent clear in his eyes. Tyrone blocked the first blow expertly, deflecting Tanner's weapon away from his face, before swiftly delivering a precise strike to Tanner's ribs. The officer gasped in pain, stumbling backward, clutching at his side. Officer Simmons and another officer rushed forward simultaneously, coordinating their movements with trained precision, hoping their numbers would overpower Tyrone's skill. Tyrone anticipated their move instantly, using his surroundings as tactical cover, turning sideways to place Simmons between himself and the other officer, forcing them to hesitate before striking. "Give up, Carter!" Simmons shouted breathlessly, desperation clear in his voice. "You can't win this!" "I don't want to hurt you," Tyrone said calmly, deflecting a swinging baton narrowly away from his head. "But you leave me no choice." As Tyrone dodged a second strike, another officer emerged suddenly from behind, delivering a heavy blow directly into Tyrone's back, knocking him sharply forward onto his knees. Pain shot up his spine, radiating through every muscle as he struggled to remain focused. The officers seized the advantage, grabbing his arms roughly, attempting to pin him down. "Hold him!" Tanner yelled breathlessly, recovering from his earlier injury. "Cuff him now!" Tyrone's adrenaline surged powerfully, overriding the pain. With a sudden explosive movement, he surged upward from the ground, throwing the officers off balance, sending one crashing forcefully against the wall. Tyrone twisted quickly, grabbing Simmons by his vest and spinning him around, disorienting him enough to send him stumbling awkwardly toward Tanner. "Stop this madness!" Tyrone shouted furiously, breathing hard as blood dripped slowly from a deep gash on his forehead, the crimson stain a stark reminder of the violent injustice unfolding inside his own home. "This is illegal. You have no warrant, no reason. We do what we need to protect this community," Tanner growled back defiantly, standing shakily, his breath short, but determination unwavering. "You're the threat here, Carter. People like you always are." Tyrone's rage burned hotter at the bitter injustice of Tanner's words, but he knew anger alone wouldn't win this fight. He needed strategy, precision, control. He regained his stance, quickly scanning the officers who regrouped again, assessing each man's posture, searching for weaknesses, points to exploit, without causing permanent damage. Tanner lunged again, his baton swinging violently in rapid succession, forcing Tyrone backward into the kitchen. Tyrone blocked several powerful strikes, ducking and weaving expertly between furious blows, using well-timed counters to deflect each assault. But Tanner wasn't alone. Another officer seized the opportunity, swiftly landing a baton strike against Tyrone's shoulder, causing him to grimace sharply as burning pain surged through his muscles. Despite his injury, Tyrone refused to yield. With unmatched determination, he countered quickly, gripping the officer's wrist in a calculated hold, twisting the man's arm into an immobilizing position until the officer dropped the baton with a startled shout of pain. "Enough!" Tyrone roared defiantly, shoving the officer roughly away, causing him to collapse onto the floor. Groaning, Tanner circled carefully, eyeing Tyrone warily, acknowledging his opponent's skill and tenacity with begrudging caution. "You're tougher than you look," he admitted harshly, breathing heavily behind his mask. "But you're only prolonging the inevitable." "The inevitable?" Tyrone responded sharply, clutching his aching shoulder, his eyes locked fiercely onto Tanner. "This entire raid is a sham, Tanner, and we both know it. You're criminals, destroying innocent lives." Tanner's temper flared again at Tyrone's accusation. "You know nothing," he spat venomously, stepping forward again, aggressively closing the distance between them. "We protect this neighborhood from thugs and criminals like you." "No," Tyrone countered passionately, his voice booming with powerful clarity. "You're the criminals here, terrorizing innocent people, tearing apart homes, lying, planting evidence." Tanner snarled viciously, launching himself forward recklessly, swinging the baton once again. Tyrone swiftly sidestepped, grabbing Tanner's wrist, twisting expertly, and forcing the baton from his grip, sending it skittering loudly across the floor. In a single fluid movement, Tyrone twisted Tanner's arm behind him and pinned him forcefully against the wall, whispering sternly in his ear, "You can't bully me. You won't break me." But just as Tyrone moved to restrain Tanner fully, another officer lunged desperately, tackling him roughly to the ground. Tyrone crashed hard, feeling the air knocked brutally from his lungs as he hit the hardwood floor. Pain radiated sharply from his ribs and shoulder, each breath now a laborious effort as he struggled beneath the weight of the larger man, pinning him down. "You're done!" Tanner shouted triumphantly, regaining his footing and breathing raggedly. "Cuff him! Let's finish this!" But Tyrone refused to surrender, rolling swiftly beneath the officer, leveraging himself skillfully into a hold that flipped the man abruptly onto his back, immobilizing him. Rising painfully, Tyrone steadied himself again, breathing labored, his eyes burning with both pain and defiant resolve. "You want to stop me?" Tyrone challenged fiercely, looking Tanner straight in the eye, daring him to continue this ruthless attack. "You better bring more than this." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, signaling imminent reinforcements. Tanner stared Tyrone down with newfound wariness, recognizing that what he had anticipated as an easy intimidation had escalated into something far more dangerous. Tyrone stood firm, injured yet unwavering, preparing himself as more officers began storming toward his home, reinforcing Tanner's menacing threat. He had fought bravely tonight, but he knew clearly this brutal struggle was far from over. The distant wail of approaching sirens sliced sharply through the thick tension that filled Tyrone's home. He knew instinctively that more officers would soon arrive. Officers who would believe every lie Tanner fed them. If he stayed, they would arrest him. They'd brand him a dangerous criminal, stripping away his freedom, reputation, and dignity. Tyrone's mind raced rapidly, weighing his options as he took steadying breaths. The house remained clouded in heavy smoke from the tear gas, providing limited visibility and confusion. But perhaps, he thought grimly, that was exactly the cover he needed to slip away before reinforcements blocked every escape route. Tanner, still regaining his breath and composure from their earlier clash, glared at Tyrone defiantly, his voice hoarse with exertion. "Hear those sirens, Carter. It's over. Reinforcements will be here any minute. You won't get far." Tyrone stood straight, despite the sharp, throbbing pain spreading through his ribs and shoulder from the earlier baton strikes. He steadied his voice, matching Tanner's defiance. "You know you've crossed the line." I promise this isn't over. I'll find proof of what you're doing. Tanner scoffed dismissively, sneering openly as he signaled the other officers to regroup. Proof? Who'll listen to you? You're just another criminal now, resisting arrest, assaulting officers. You're finished. The words stung bitterly, but Tyrone refused to show it, his gaze unwavering as he quickly calculated a strategy for escape. The side garage door, slightly ajar from the chaos, caught his eye. A slim opportunity, but his best chance. You won't get away with this, Tyrone said calmly, masking his intention with careful, steady words. You may control your men, Tanner, but you don't control the truth. Enough of this, Tanner growled, stepping closer, baton raised again aggressively. Get on the ground now. Don't make it harder on yourself. But Tyrone had already made his decision. With precise timing, he pivoted suddenly, sprinting toward the kitchen as Tanner shouted furiously, "Stop him!" Two officers lunged forward clumsily, impeded by lingering smoke and debris from their destructive search. Tyrone moved fluidly through the fog of gas, quickly evading the first officer's grasp before deftly sidestepping the second, shoving him firmly aside into a toppled shelf, scattering kitchen utensils loudly across the floor. He reached the narrow hallway toward the garage, but suddenly, Simmons appeared directly in front of him, panic and confusion clear in his eyes, baton raised shakily. "Just stop, Carter! Please!" Tyrone paused only briefly, his voice steady and commanding. "Move, Simmons! Don't make me hurt you!" Simmons hesitated momentarily, his conflicted emotions evident. It was enough. Tyrone swiftly grabbed Simmons's wrist, applying precise pressure until Simmons dropped the baton, wincing but unharmed. Tyrone quickly pushed him aside, moving forward without further harm. The garage door loomed just ahead. Tyrone burst through it, swiftly and silently slipping into the shadows of the driveway. Immediately assessing his surroundings, flashing red and blue lights grew nearer, illuminating neighboring houses, their harsh glare promising imminent danger if he lingered even a second longer. Tyrone moved quickly, quietly, slipping into the deeper darkness along a side hedge. He ducked low, using cars parked along the street as additional concealment, feeling every muscle strain painfully but ignoring it, driven by necessity and survival. Behind him, he heard Tanner's voice shout furiously into his radio, desperation clear. Suspect fled on foot, armed, dangerous. Need immediate perimeter lockdown. Tyrone knew precisely what they were doing, painting him as a dangerous fugitive, justifying their aggression and brutality. Rage flared inside him again, tempered immediately by trained discipline. Anger alone wouldn't save him now. Only precision, clarity, and resolve would see him through this nightmare. Swiftly and silently, Tyrone slipped from yard to yard, avoiding the bright beams of flashlight sweeps, narrowly evading officers urgently converging onto his property. He watched from the shadows as patrol cars flooded his street, spilling out men intent on capturing him. His heart twisted painfully as he glimpsed neighbors he once greeted warmly now standing outside, whispering anxiously, their eyes filled with uncertainty and confusion. "You can't hide forever, Carter," Tanner's harsh voice echoed distantly behind him, full of bitter frustration. "We'll find you." Tyrone drew a steadying breath, his resolve strengthening. Hiding wasn't his plan, not permanently at least. He would retreat, regroup, and fight back on his own terms. They wanted him silenced, but he vowed he would make sure the world heard his truth. Deeper into the city he went, shadows embracing him like allies as he moved swiftly and carefully. He slipped effortlessly through narrow alleys, down quiet streets, his sharp instincts guiding him away from pursuing officers and their desperate searchlights. As the chaotic scene behind him slowly faded into distant noise, Tyrone paused in a darkened alleyway, leaning briefly against the cool brick wall. He took careful breaths, ignoring the pain from his bruised ribs, assessing what resources he had left. No home, No allies, just his instincts, his skills, and his unyielding determination to expose the injustice done to him. Standing there in the shadows, alone but resolute, Tyrone knew clearly that his life had changed forever. He was now considered a fugitive, hunted unjustly by those who abused power, hiding their crimes behind badges and authority. They had tried to break him, yet instead, they had ignited within him an unstoppable resolve. Straightening, he stepped back into the night, committed now to uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. Tanner and his corrupt allies believed their lies and power made them untouchable. But they underestimated Tyrone's strength, resilience, and determination. They didn't yet realize how gravely mistaken they were. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and nearer with each passing second. Tyrone leaned heavily against the cold brick wall of an alley, fighting through the throbbing pain in his side and shoulder. His breathing came in sharp, shallow bursts as the reality of his situation settled in. He wasn't just escaping an unjust raid. He was now branded as a dangerous criminal, hunted ruthlessly by the very system he'd once sworn to defend. Carefully checking over his shoulder, Tyrone moved swiftly along the narrow, shadowed street, keeping himself hidden from the probing eyes of passing patrol cars. He quickly reached a public phone on a dimly lit corner, glanced nervously around to ensure he wasn't spotted, and dialed the only person he trusted implicitly, his younger sister, Rachel. Rachel answered after several anxious rings, her voice groggy but immediately alert. "Ty? What's going on?" "It's late." "Rachel," Tyrone began, his voice steady but urgent, "I'm in serious trouble. I just got raided by the police. They came in hard, claiming they had a warrant for drugs. But there was no warrant. They tore apart my house, and when I resisted, they made me out to be some dangerous criminal." Rachel's voice sharpened instantly, becoming fully alert. "Wait. Slow down. What do you mean, drugs? Tyrone, you don't—" "No, of course not," he interrupted firmly. "They lied. Tanner led the raid. They smashed up everything and planted something. I'm sure of it. It was deliberate. This wasn't random. They planned this to ruin me." Rachel paused, processing his words carefully, a familiar bitterness seeping into her voice as the reality hit home. "I've heard something like this before, Tyrone. They've used these tactics on others, mostly black homeowners, framing them for drug possession to force them out." "Framing people?" Tyrone echoed in disbelief, anger surging through him again. "You're saying this has happened before, and no one has stopped it?" Rachel sighed deeply, frustration evident. "As a public defender, I've handled a few cases. Always the same pattern. Random drug raids, no real evidence, property damaged, homeowners arrested. They can't afford a long court fight, so they're forced to sell their houses cheap to cover legal fees." Tyrone clenched the phone tighter, his voice low and controlled, but brimming with fury. "This is bigger than just harassment. They're systematically destroying lives for profit." "Exactly," Rachel replied grimly. "They target people they assume won't fight back or can't afford to. Once arrested, the homeowners spend everything on lawyers, eventually losing their homes. Then a developer swoops in, buying properties cheaply and turning massive profits. It's been happening quietly, nobody proving it outright, but I've suspected it for a long time." "Rachel, I can't let this happen to me," Tyrone said with determined urgency. "They destroyed everything I built. If they catch me, they'll bury me beneath their lies." She hesitated, concern evident. "Tyrone, right now they're calling you armed and dangerous. They'll use any excuse." "I'm not surrendering," Tyrone said resolutely. "I need evidence. I need to show the truth." "You said there's a pattern. Give me names, records, anything I can use to prove what they've done." Rachel paused briefly, weighing the risk against the necessity. Finally, she spoke decisively. "Okay, there are several homeowners I've represented in court. I have their cases documented. Same officers involved, same accusations. Tanner's always there. If you can find evidence connecting these officers to the developers buying the properties, that might be enough." "Do you have names?" Tyrone asked urgently, glancing cautiously over his shoulder as another police cruiser slowly passed by, its spotlight scanning methodically. "I'll get them," Rachel assured him quickly. "But Tyrone, please be careful. These people have power. They're protected. You're up against more than corrupt cops. You're facing a system built to silence men like you." "I understand," Tyrone replied, his voice quiet yet filled with determination. "But someone has to stand up to them." Rachel's voice softened, mixed with worry and pride. "Just stay alive, Ty. I'll call you when I have something solid. Until then, keep your head down." Tyrone nodded firmly, even though she couldn't see him. "I will. Just hurry." Ending the call carefully, Tyrone stood for a moment, breathing deeply, absorbing the weight of what he'd learned. The injustice wasn't random, it was intentional and systematic, driven by greed and racism. These corrupt officers weren't working alone. They were simply pawns in a much larger scheme. His jaw set in quiet determination. They had destroyed his home, endangered his life, and tarnished his reputation. But they had underestimated him deeply. Tyrone Carter had never been one to run from a fight, and this one, perhaps the most important of his life, was just beginning. Glancing around cautiously once more, he vanished quietly into the shadows, knowing clearly what he needed to do next. He had a conspiracy to uncover, criminals to expose, and a name to clear. He would gather evidence, reveal their corruption, and ensure justice was finally done. Not only for himself, but for every person wrongly victimized by these ruthless men. They had chosen the wrong target this time, and soon they would realize just how grave a mistake they had made. Detective Malcolm Hayes stared at the open file on his desk, rubbing his temples thoughtfully as frustration built steadily within him. As an internal affairs investigator, he'd dealt with corruption before. Yet something about this pattern of questionable raids and arrests in Tyrone Carter's neighborhood troubled him deeply. The repeated names, the same vague accusations, each time leading to arrests, property seizures, and forced sales, hinted at a conspiracy carefully hidden within his own department. His thoughts were interrupted abruptly as his phone rang, the shrill sound echoing sharply through the dim office. "Hayes," he answered sharply. "Detective Hayes," a tense voice came through the receiver, cautious yet insistent. "This is Rachel Carter. I'm a public defender. My brother, Tyrone, was just raided by your officers. He says it was completely unjustified. No warrant, no cause. They're accusing him of narcotics possession." Hayes sat upright, instantly alert. "Are you sure there was no warrant? I haven't seen anything official." "Absolutely certain," Rachel insisted firmly. "Tyrone has never touched drugs. They tore apart his house, planted something, and now they're labeling him armed and dangerous." Hayes drew a careful breath, recognizing the dangerous implications of her claims. "This isn't isolated, Rachel. I've seen reports. Same charges, same officers involved, same vague evidence. Give me your brother's location. He needs protection." "He won't trust police," Rachel replied quickly, voice tight with anxiety. "He's convinced your officers tried to kill him. If you're serious about helping, find out why they targeted him. Stay safe," Hayes cautioned solemnly. "I'll look into Tanner and his men, but tell Tyrone to lay low. These people won't stop easily." Across town, Tyrone moved carefully through shadowed streets, steadily closing in on the precinct's rear entrance. He knew precisely what he sought. Evidence stored away in police archives, records that could reveal the pattern Rachel suspected. The weight of his mission pressed heavily upon him, but he advanced confidently, slipping silently toward the darkened rear of the precinct building. Climbing silently up the fire escape ladder, he easily reached the second-floor window. With practiced hands, he quietly opened the latch and stepped into the dark corridor, quickly and stealthily approaching the evidence room door. Using his training, he carefully picked the lock, slipping inside undetected. Inside the evidence room, shelves lined every wall, filled with countless files, boxes, and sealed bags labeled with case numbers and names. Tyrone quickly scanned through the documents, heart racing as the truth emerged clearly before him. Each file was nearly identical. False narcotics charges, fabricated warrants, planted evidence. Names of homeowners he recognized from his neighborhood filled page after page. People unjustly accused. Lives destroyed. This was never random, Tyrone muttered angrily, carefully slipping key files into his jacket. They knew exactly who to target. Suddenly, a faint creaking noise echoed from the hallway outside, pulling Tyrone's attention instantly. Footsteps approached cautiously, stopping just outside the room. Tyrone tensed, every muscle alert, sensing imminent danger. Without warning, Officer Tanner stepped forcefully into the doorway, gun drawn, eyes blazing with triumph and hatred. "I figured you'd show up here eventually, Carter. You criminals always return to the scene of the crime." Tyrone stood calmly, posture defensive yet unafraid, matching Tanner's fierce gaze directly. "The only criminal here is you, Tanner. These files prove it." Tanner smirked coldly, stepping deeper into the room, weapon steady. "Hand those over, and maybe I'll let you leave here breathing." Tyrone shook his head resolutely, voice controlled and unwavering. "Not a chance. You've destroyed enough lives. It ends now." Tanner lunged forward aggressively, weapon aimed threateningly, attempting to seize Tyrone forcefully. Tyrone quickly sidestepped, deflecting Tanner's arm, causing the gun to discharge harmlessly into a stack of papers, scattering files dramatically across the room. Instantly, they grappled violently, crashing into shelves and filing cabinets, sending heavy boxes toppling chaotically onto the floor around them. Tanner swung fiercely, his fist connecting sharply with Tyrone's jaw, pain jolting sharply through Tyrone's face, forcing him briefly backward. Breathing heavily, Tanner pressed his attack, eyes wild with rage. "You're done, Carter!" he roared, lunging again, but Tyrone's reflexes were honed sharply by training. He quickly recovered, expertly blocking Tanner's next swing, countering with a swift strike to Tanner's abdomen, forcing the officer momentarily breathless. Tanner stumbled, but quickly regained his stance, snarling in anger. "This won't end how you think," Tanner growled viciously. "No one will ever believe you." Tyrone steadied himself again, voice firm with quiet conviction. "Truth always comes out, Tanner, no matter how deeply you bury it." Enraged, Tanner rushed forward again, wrestling fiercely with Tyrone. They struggled violently against each other, bodies crashing against shelves, files scattering everywhere as the room descended into chaos. Tyrone landed a controlled blow against Tanner's ribs, forcing a painful grunt. But Tanner retaliated swiftly, driving Tyrone forcefully into the filing cabinet behind him, causing sharp pain to explode through his bruised shoulder. They stood apart momentarily, breathing heavily, glaring defiantly at each other, each recognizing clearly that neither would easily back down. Tyrone wiped blood slowly from his lip, eyes burning with defiance and determination. Tanner, breathing raggedly, steadied himself, gripping his weapon tightly, eyes filled with bitter contempt. "You had a choice, Carter," Tanner spat bitterly. "You should have just given up." Tyrone stood tall, unwavering, his voice calm but powerful. "I'm not giving up. I'm bringing you down." Outside, alarms began blaring loudly, the noise echoing sharply through the building, signaling imminent reinforcements. Tanner smiled bitterly, sensing advantage. Too late for heroics. "Backup's on the way." Tyrone quickly assessed the room, mind racing rapidly. His escape was narrowing, but surrender meant certain defeat. With unwavering resolve, he took a steady breath, knowing clearly the fight had only just begun. This battle wasn't over. Not yet, and not until justice was done. The wailing alarms filled the air, echoing urgently through the police station halls, bathing the evidence room in flickering red emergency lights. Tyrone knew time was running out rapidly as the sounds of heavy boots thundered closer, reinforcements arriving swiftly to corner him. Tanner stood opposite, face twisted with hatred and frustration, gun trembling slightly in his hand, his confidence shaken, yet his rage fueling reckless courage. "You've got nowhere to run, Carter," Tanner snarled, lunging aggressively toward him again, this time driven by pure anger. Weapon raised. "I'm ending this now." Tyrone braced himself instantly, muscles tense and alert. As Tanner charged forward, Tyrone swiftly deflected Tanner's gun hand away, expertly twisting his wrist sharply until the gun clattered loudly onto the floor. Tanner howled furiously in pain, but immediately retaliated, striking Tyrone hard with his free fist, sending a painful shock through Tyrone's already injured shoulder. Both men crashed heavily against the shelves, scattering more files chaotically onto the floor. Tanner's brute strength became more aggressive, throwing powerful blows with increasing desperation, each strike aimed to injure severely. Tyrone blocked and deflected skillfully, using precision to counter Tanner's sheer force, yet exhaustion began to creep into his movements, his injuries from the earlier raid now taking their toll. "You ruined my life," Tyrone hissed angrily, countering another wild punch from Tanner, quickly retaliating with a precise elbow strike against Tanner's jaw. "You destroyed innocent people's lives." "Why?" Tanner staggered back momentarily, blood trickling from a fresh cut on his lip, breathing raggedly. "Because people like you don't deserve what you have. You think you're better? Smarter? You're nothing. I earned everything I have." Tyrone snapped sharply, ducking another fierce punch, countering swiftly with a strike to Tanner's ribs. "You abused power, betrayed your badge." They grappled violently again, bodies crashing into filing cabinets, metal and paper raining down around them. Tanner growled fiercely, managing to slam Tyrone backward forcefully against the heavy metal door frame, sending searing pain radiating sharply down Tyrone's spine. He gasped, momentarily stunned, vision blurring briefly. "See?" Tanner gloated breathlessly, pressing advantage. "You're not special. You bleed like everyone else." Summoning renewed strength, Tyrone drove forward powerfully, using his shoulder to knock Tanner backward into a shelf, the crash reverberating loudly through the room. He swiftly landed two rapid, controlled strikes to Tanner's abdomen, causing the officer to stumble forward in agony. As Tanner collapsed to one knee, coughing and struggling for breath, Tyrone stood painfully, gasping himself, exhaustion evident, but eyes blazing defiantly. "Justice matters," Tyrone declared fiercely, voice steady despite the chaos. "You'll answer for your crimes." Yet Tanner, driven by fury and pride, lunged again desperately, pulling a hidden knife from his belt, slashing wildly at Tyrone. Tyrone reacted instantly, narrowly dodging the blade but feeling its cold edge slice across his forearm. He grimaced sharply at the burning pain, but quickly seized Tanner's wrist, twisting it sharply until Tanner dropped the knife, screaming in pain. "You won't win!" Tanner growled desperately, writhing painfully in Tyrone's grip. "They'll hunt you forever. You're a dead man!" Tyrone pushed Tanner backward, away from him, breathing heavily as he pressed his hand firmly against the bleeding wound on his arm. "If that's what it takes to expose you, I'll accept it." Loud voices echoed from the corridor now, shouting commands urgently, signaling imminent arrival of backup. Tyrone quickly scanned the chaotic room, knowing he had mere seconds left to escape. Ignoring the throbbing pain in his body, he quickly grabbed the scattered files he'd gathered as evidence, tucking them securely beneath his jacket. Tanner, on the floor, looked up weakly, eyes filled with contempt, yet helpless to stop him now. "You're finished, Carter. They'll never believe your story." "Truth doesn't need belief. It needs proof," Tyrone replied sharply, voice firm with conviction as he stepped back toward the open doorway. "I've got it." Suddenly, the sounds of approaching footsteps became louder, urgent voices shouting, "Tanner, where are you?" Realizing his opportunity for escape was shrinking rapidly, Tyrone rushed quickly into the dark hallway, moving silently toward the fire escape he'd entered through earlier. The hallway lights flickered ominously, voices echoing clearly as officers closed in from both directions. Adrenaline surged powerfully, Tyrone's military instincts kicking in fully, driving him swiftly toward his only chance at freedom. With mere moments to spare, he reached the fire escape, slipping through the window and rapidly descending into the shadows below. Sirens screamed louder, patrol cars converging rapidly. Yet Tyrone moved swiftly through the maze of alleys and streets, disappearing silently into darkness. Behind him, the precinct became alive with frantic activity. Tanner, staggering weakly into the corridor, shouted furiously, "Suspect escaped! He's dangerous! Shoot on sight!" But Tyrone was already gone, swiftly slipping away into the city's protective darkness, understanding clearly now that the police no longer sought his arrest. Tanner's bitter words resonated grimly. He was indeed a hunted man, targeted for elimination, not capture. Standing briefly in the shadowed alley, heart racing, body aching deeply, Tyrone clutched the precious evidence against his chest, recognizing fully the magnitude of the battle ahead. They had made him into a fugitive, but now he would fight back, not only for himself, but for every innocent homeowner targeted and ruined by corrupt men like Tanner. Exhausted but determined, Tyrone disappeared silently into the night, preparing himself fully for the relentless fight ahead. He was hunted, yet never more committed to bringing truth to light. The police had chosen war, and Tyrone Carter was ready to face it, until justice was served. Morning sunlight spilled weakly through heavy clouds as Tyrone silently navigated his way through the quiet city streets, pulse quickening as he tightened his grip on the thick packet of stolen files. The confrontation with Tanner still lingered fresh in his mind, each wound a grim reminder that he had become a marked man. Every shadow seemed a threat, every passing vehicle a potential trap. Yet he pressed forward, determination burning fiercely within him. He knew the truth he carried was powerful enough to expose everything, but only if he could deliver it safely into the right hands. Finding a secluded payphone, Tyrone dialed the number Rachel had given him earlier. After a tense pause, a calm yet cautious voice answered, "Marcus Fuller, City Tribune. Fuller, my name is Tyrone Carter," he said quietly, but urgently, glancing carefully around the street for any sign of pursuit. "I have something important for you. Proof of police corruption. You're the only person who can help." Marcus hesitated briefly, curiosity evident in his tone. "Carter, you're all over the news tonight. The police are labeling you dangerous. What's going on?" "They're lying," Tyrone insisted firmly, fighting to keep his voice calm despite the urgency. "They framed me. I've got files, solid evidence that proves they've been systematically raiding homes, falsifying drug charges, forcing people out." Marcus paused again, considering carefully. "If you really have evidence, meet me somewhere secure. But if this is some trick—" "This isn't a trick," Tyrone replied sharply, desperation clear in his voice. "Check the records I give you. Tanner and his officers are involved. They're systematically targeting homeowners to drive them out. Innocent people, Marcus. I'm trusting you with my life here." There was another tense silence before Marcus finally responded decisively. "The old parking garage behind Ellis Street, in 1 hour. Leave the documents hidden behind the dumpster. I'll collect them, but I won't wait. Make sure you're not followed." Tyrone ended the call swiftly, heart pounding, fully aware of the danger ahead. He moved cautiously toward the location, senses heightened, every step shadowed by paranoia. After carefully observing for several minutes, Tyrone slipped discreetly into the alley behind the old Tribune building, swiftly placing the files securely behind a stack of cardboard boxes next to the dumpsters. He faded quickly back into the shadows across the street, watching carefully from a concealed vantage point. Moments later, Marcus appeared nervously, eyes darting suspiciously around the alley. After confirming he was alone, Marcus swiftly collected the package and disappeared back toward his car. For the first time in hours, Tyrone allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. Maybe, finally, the truth would surface. Yet by evening, as he stood hidden behind a newsstand on a crowded street corner, Tyrone watched the breaking news with growing frustration. An anonymous whistleblower provided documents today alleging serious corruption within our city police department, the anchor announced gravely. However, police officials swiftly dismissed the allegations, calling them fraudulent. Chief Milton assured residents there is no truth behind the claims, accusing Tyrone Carter of forging evidence in a desperate attempt to evade justice. Tyrone clenched his jaw, heart heavy with bitterness. They had crushed his story before it could gain momentum. The police controlled the narrative expertly, painting him publicly as dangerous and deceptive. With few options left, Tyrone quickly moved to another payphone, dialing Rachel's number. When she picked up, concern saturated her voice. "Ty, I saw the news. They're burying everything. They were ready for it," Tyrone answered bitterly. "The police knew exactly how to shut it down. We need something bigger, something undeniable. They're protecting whoever's behind this." Rachel paused thoughtfully before responding, voice calm and focused. "You mentioned Tanner repeatedly. If he's doing this for someone else, you need direct proof. Money trails, conversations, something concrete." "Exactly," Tyrone agreed heavily. "I need something to connect these officers directly to whoever's profiting from this." Rachel spoke carefully, realization clear in her voice. "There's a property developer I've seen repeatedly connected to these cases, Chris Delgado. Every time a raid happens, he's the one who buys up those houses cheaply afterward. We always suspected, but we never found solid proof." Tyrone's eyes narrowed sharply with determination, gripping the phone tighter. "Then that's my next step. I have to find direct evidence linking Delgado to these cops." Rachel's voice grew tense with worry. "Be careful, Tyrone. Delgado's powerful. He's protected. Influential. You'll need to be smarter. Quicker. If he suspects you're onto him, he'll bury everything." "He won't get the chance," Tyrone replied resolutely, voice quietly fierce with determination. "I won't stop until this corruption is exposed." Ending the call decisively, Tyrone turned and swiftly disappeared into the shadows, steeling himself for the dangerous path ahead. The battle was escalating, but the path forward was clearer than ever. They had painted him as a criminal, buried the truth beneath their lies. But now, Tyrone Carter would turn their own weapons against them. Chris Delgado had hidden behind power and money for too long, believing himself untouchable. But Tyrone would find him, expose him, and make sure the world saw exactly who he was. He would ensure justice was served. Evening shadows deepened as Tyrone stood silently beneath the overpass near the outskirts of the city, his heart steady but tense, eyes carefully scanning passing vehicles for any signs of surveillance. A dark sedan pulled slowly toward the curb, headlights off, engine barely audible as it approached cautiously. The passenger window lowered slightly, revealing Rachel's worried yet determined face. "Get in," she urged quickly. Glancing anxiously around the deserted street, Tyrone swiftly slid into the passenger seat, carefully shutting the door behind him as Rachel drove smoothly away, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "I've got a location," Rachel began immediately, handing Tyrone a small notebook with quickly scribbled details. "Delgado meets Sergeant Ethan Cole tonight at the Harbor View Hotel. It's exclusive, heavily guarded, but it's our only shot at catching them together." Tyrone examined the notes intently, memorizing each detail, eyes sharp and calculating. "If I can record their conversation, something linking them explicitly, this nightmare ends. But getting close won't be easy." Rachel glanced over briefly, concern evident. "If anyone can do this, it's you. But Tyrone, Delgado's security is professional, former military themselves. They'll shoot on sight if you're discovered." Tyrone exhaled slowly, determination unwavering. "Then I won't be discovered. Delgado has hidden too long behind his money. Tonight, we expose him." Later that evening, darkness cloaked the luxurious facade of Delgado's upscale downtown hotel, a sleek structure that spoke of wealth, secrecy, and privilege. Tyrone carefully observed from a concealed vantage point across the street, mentally mapping out security positions, exits, and patrol patterns. Every detail was crucial. Every moment counted. Carefully concealed, he slipped silently past security patrols, blending effortlessly into shadows cast by tall hedges surrounding the lavish property. His training guided him instinctively, movements fluid and precise, each step carefully placed to avoid triggering sensors or security alarms. Inside the grand conference room, Sergeant Ethan Cole sat comfortably across from Chris Delgado. The developer's face relaxed, confident, utterly assured of his safety. Delgado poured whiskey calmly into a crystal glass, smiling coldly at Cole across the polished mahogany table. "You assured me Carter would be handled," Delgado stated flatly, voice calm but edged with frustration. "Yet he's still out there spreading trouble. This isn't acceptable, Sergeant." "We underestimated him," Cole admitted, voice tense but controlled. "Carter's more resourceful than we anticipated, but he's isolated now. He can't go public without proof." Delgado leaned forward slowly, eyes narrowing with icy intensity. "Proof? Your incompetence allowed him to breach your precinct already. If he finds out about our arrangement—" "He won't," Cole quickly assured him, voice quieter but firm. "We have men hunting him constantly. He's desperate, reckless. We'll finish this before he does any more damage." Tyrone held his breath, concealed tightly behind the nearby terrace curtains, gripping the small recording device firmly in his hand, capturing every damning word exchanged between Cole and Delgado. This evidence was explosive, undeniable proof that a senior police officer conspired directly with the powerful developer, orchestrating innocent families' destruction. Delgado stepped closer, voice chillingly calm. "I pay you generously, Cole, not for excuses, but for results. This entire plan collapses if Carter exposes us. Those properties must become ours. No more delays." Cole nodded nervously, tone deferential yet anxious. "It's already in motion. Carter won't survive long enough to reveal anything further. I promise you that." The sinister implication hung heavy in the air, chilling Tyrone deeply. It wasn't enough they'd tried to frame him. They intended to eliminate him entirely. The stakes had never felt more real or more dangerous. Suddenly, Delgado's eyes narrowed suspiciously, head turning slightly toward Tyrone's concealed location. Tyrone froze, heart hammering rapidly, every muscle tensed, ready to move at the slightest indication he'd been discovered. "Did you hear something?" Delgado asked sharply, eyes narrowing. Cole glanced around warily, hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "Probably nothing, but I'll have security sweep the perimeter." "Do it quickly," Delgado demanded sharply, standing abruptly. "No more mistakes, Sergeant." Tyrone quickly and silently moved from his hiding place, heart racing with urgency, knowing discovery now meant certain death. He carefully retraced his path, slipping quietly through the shadowed corridor as footsteps echoed urgently from security approaching behind him. Outside, security guards mobilized swiftly, flashlights slicing aggressively through the shadows. Tyrone navigated rapidly through the grounds, each step precise and silent, slipping expertly through gaps in their search patterns, blending seamlessly with darkness. As he reached the property's perimeter fence, a sudden voice called sharply behind him, "Hold it right there!" Tyrone froze briefly, adrenaline flooding him before instinct took control. He swiftly scaled the fence, bullets striking harmlessly against metal just inches from him. As he dropped smoothly to the other side, rolling gracefully to his feet and vanishing swiftly into darkness. As he sprinted silently into the protective shadows, he clutched the recorder firmly, breathing heavily but filled with fierce triumph. He'd survived again. But now he had undeniable proof linking Delgado directly to Cole. The conspiracy was exposed, their sinister alliance laid bare. They had underestimated him once again, and now he had the evidence to take them down. The city lay wrapped in darkness, a cool mist drifting quietly across deserted streets, cloaking the neighborhood in a deep and uneasy silence. Tyrone watched carefully from his hidden vantage point, atop a dilapidated building across from an abandoned warehouse, every muscle tense, every breath calm and measured. Tonight's mission was crucial, not only for his own survival, but for exposing the hidden corruption that had stolen so many innocent lives. He knew exactly who would be arriving soon: Sergeant Ethan Cole, a highly respected yet deeply corrupt officer known throughout the department for his ruthless efficiency. Cole was Tanner's direct superior, a man who thrived on violence and intimidation, feared by his subordinates, and respected only because of his ruthless ability to deliver results at any cost. Cole's loyalty wasn't to justice, but to whoever paid the highest price. And tonight, Tyrone planned to exploit that ruthlessness to bring him down. Earlier that day, Tyrone had spent meticulous hours preparing for this moment. He'd used burner phones and encrypted emails, carefully layering anonymous tips through different sources, planting believable yet utterly false intelligence. Each message subtly suggested that he'd been spotted hiding inside an abandoned warehouse near the city's edge, injured, desperate, and armed. The details had been constructed precisely, painting him as cornered and weakened, exactly the scenario Sergeant Ethan Cole and his tactical unit would find irresistible. Cole was notoriously ruthless, a respected yet feared figure within the police force, a career-driven sergeant who valued results above all else. Tyrone knew Cole wouldn't simply ignore the opportunity. The sergeant was too arrogant, too eager to claim victory, especially against someone labeled a dangerous fugitive. Tyrone had baited the hook expertly, knowing Cole would eagerly rush in, confident in his authority and blinded by his eagerness to close the hunt. From his concealed vantage point, Tyrone observed patiently, listening through a hacked police scanner earpiece. Static crackled softly in his ear as Cole's familiar authoritative voice broke through sharply. "All units, this is Sergeant Cole. Target confirmed sighted at Warehouse 21. Reports indicate suspect is injured, possibly armed. Move cautiously, but don't hesitate. We neutralize Carter tonight." Tyrone's jaw tightened slightly as Cole's cold words echoed clearly through the comms. He remained perfectly still, heart quickening slightly, but control never faltering. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Right on cue, several police vehicles converged aggressively toward the abandoned warehouse across the street, headlights off, moving swiftly but quietly through shadows. Sergeant Ethan Cole emerged first, a stocky figure silhouetted by faint streetlights, exuding authority yet blinded by dangerous confidence. "Teams 1 and 2, secure perimeter exits," Cole ordered sharply into his radio, voice edged with urgency and authority. "We're dealing with Carter. He won't hesitate to engage. Shoot if he resists." These officers were no longer attempting arrest. They intended to eliminate him entirely. He steadied his breathing, activated the transmitter hidden beneath his vest, and began broadcasting every command and order directly onto the internet, live streaming their betrayal for the world to witness in real time. Tyrone's voice whispered quietly into the microphone, calm and deliberate. "You all see this? These are the officers sworn to protect you, abusing their power, lying, planning to kill an innocent man." Across the city, in a small apartment lit only by the glow of his laptop screen, Detective Malcolm Hayes watched intently, disbelief and dread spreading across his face as he heard Cole's harsh voice clearly, broadcasting directly through the live feed. "Officer units," Cole continued sharply, unaware of the broadcast, "enter swiftly. Secure Tyrone Carter by any means necessary. Command wants him silenced tonight. No survivors." Hayes leaned forward urgently, heart racing at the undeniable proof unfolding before him. This was the smoking gun he'd long suspected existed, the irrefutable proof of corruption within his own department, now unmistakably clear. Back at the warehouse, Tyrone quietly observed as Cole's tactical team burst inside the darkened building, their flashlights slicing sharply through darkness, tactical gear and weapons primed for violence. From his concealed vantage point, Tyrone monitored carefully, transmitting every movement, every aggressive command issued, directly online for all to see. "Search carefully," Cole barked harshly, voice growing impatient as his men methodically swept room after empty room. "He's dangerous. Assume hostile intent. Shoot to kill if necessary." Across the city, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, Detective Malcolm Hayes stared intently at his laptop, eyes wide with disbelief and dread. He watched the live stream unfolding before him, each damning detail shaking his faith in a department he'd once respected. Cole's voice was unmistakable, unmistakably clear, caught openly conspiring to eliminate Tyrone, openly giving orders in direct violation of every principle Hayes had ever sworn to uphold. He knew he couldn't look away. Not this time. Cole, Tanner, and the others had crossed the line openly and publicly, leaving Hayes no choice but to act. The detective leaned forward anxiously, fully aware of what this evidence meant. Undeniable proof of corruption within the heart of the force he once proudly served. Yet now, honor and justice outweighed any loyalty he felt toward his department. Hayes reached for his phone, fingers trembling slightly with the gravity of the decision he was about to make, and dialed the number of his supervisor at Internal Affairs. "This is Detective Malcolm Hayes," he spoke firmly, voice filled with quiet conviction. "I have proof of widespread corruption involving Sergeant Ethan Cole, Officer Tanner, and others. They're attempting to kill an innocent man named Tyrone Carter tonight. I'm sending you a live feed right now." As he ended the call, Hayes exhaled slowly, heavily, understanding exactly how dangerous his next steps would be. Yet, deep inside, he felt the undeniable certainty he'd done the right thing. Tyrone Carter had forced him to finally face the truth, to act decisively against corruption he'd suspected for too long. Now there was no turning back. Detective Malcolm Hayes felt his pulse quicken sharply as he drove swiftly through the quiet, dimly lit streets toward the warehouse district, his hands tightening around the steering wheel. The disturbing live stream of Sergeant Cole's orders to eliminate Tyrone replayed vividly in his mind, each word burning into his conscience. Hayes had always suspected corruption lingered quietly beneath the surface, but now it had erupted openly, undeniable, exposing the very core of a system he'd dedicated his career to protecting. Pulling up cautiously a block away from the abandoned warehouse, he killed the headlights, stepping quietly from his vehicle, careful to remain unseen. His heart pounded in rhythm with each hurried step toward the darkened building, anxiety gripping him tightly as he moved closer, uncertain of what he'd find, or whether Tyrone was even still alive. Meanwhile, Tyrone moved quickly through the shadows just beyond the perimeter fence, swiftly slipping between rusted cars and abandoned equipment, always alert, always ready. He'd narrowly escaped Tanner moments ago, but now every police officer in the city knew precisely where he was, or believed him to be. The hacked comms in his earpiece crackled urgently as Sergeant Cole shouted commands desperately to his scattered, confused tactical team inside the warehouse. "Secure every exit! Tyrone Carter does not leave here alive, understood?" Tyrone paused briefly, crouching low against a rusted shipping container, scanning for his next move, when suddenly he sensed movement nearby. Someone was approaching. Footsteps, cautious, but hurried. Tyrone tensed instantly, preparing to move, until a familiar voice broke softly through the darkness, barely audible yet filled with urgency. "Carter, it's Detective Malcolm Hayes," the voice whispered firmly but cautiously. "I'm not here to hurt you." "You need to listen," Tyrone hesitated cautiously, watching carefully from his concealed position, uncertain of Hayes's intentions. "How do I know I can trust you?" he asked sharply, voice low and guarded, revealing nothing of his position. Hayes stepped slowly forward, hands visibly empty, eyes searching anxiously through the darkness. "Because I've seen enough tonight to know you're innocent. I watched your live stream. Cole, Tanner, Delgado, They've been lying to all of us, but we need to get you out of here safely, so we can expose them properly." Tyrone assessed the detective's sincerity carefully, finally stepping slowly from his hidden position, eyes sharp and wary. "You had your suspicions long before tonight. Why didn't you act sooner?" Hayes sighed heavily, guilt clear on his face, even in the faint shadows. "Because suspicion wasn't proof. Tonight, you gave us undeniable proof. I couldn't look away. The city's been ignoring corruption too long, but now we can end it." Tyrone remained cautious, voice calm yet firm. "Cole and his team won't stop. Not tonight. Not ever. Unless Delgado himself is exposed. He's behind everything, profiting from innocent lives destroyed." "I know," Hayes replied seriously, glancing anxiously over his shoulder toward distant shouts echoing from the warehouse. "But Delgado is untouchable without hard evidence directly linking him to these raids. We have to find something concrete. Financial records, transactions, something solid." Tyrone's mind raced rapidly, considering his next move carefully. "I already recorded Delgado meeting with Cole. It's enough to expose their conspiracy, but only if someone listens." Hayes's eyes widened with sudden hope, realization dawning clearly on his face. "Then we need to get you, and that evidence, to safety. The entire department is hunting you, Carter. If they find you tonight, Delgado wins." Suddenly, their urgent conversation was interrupted sharply by the frantic sound of footsteps and shouting as Cole's officers spilled out of the warehouse, flashlights slicing wildly through darkness, converging swiftly upon their position. Hayes quickly motioned Tyrone toward a narrow alleyway behind them, whispering urgently, "Go! I'll distract them. Get that evidence somewhere safe." Tyrone hesitated briefly, evaluating Hayes carefully. The detective nodded firmly, determination clear in his eyes. "Trust me, Carter. I'll make sure they don't catch you tonight." Tyrone finally nodded, slipping silently into the shadows of the alley, moving swiftly but silently away from the rapidly approaching officers. Behind him, Hayes raised his badge sharply, stepping forward into the glare of flashlights, addressing Cole's startled men firmly. "Hold your fire. This is Detective Hayes. Internal Affairs. You're interfering with an official investigation." "Stand down!" Cole emerged angrily from the group, eyes narrowed suspiciously, voice harsh and defiant. "Hayes, you're aiding a fugitive. Carter is dangerous. He needs to be stopped." "No," Hayes retorted sharply, standing confidently despite the palpable tension. "Carter's innocent, and you know it. Your actions tonight prove it clearly. You've lost control, Sergeant. I suggest you surrender your weapon." Cole stared coldly, stepping dangerously closer, voice low and threatening. "You're making a huge mistake, Detective." "No, Cole. You made the mistake," Hayes responded calmly, voice firm and unyielding. "It's over." As Cole hesitated angrily, Tyrone moved swiftly through the shadowed streets, gripping the precious recording tightly beneath his vest. Hayes had bought him precious time, and now Tyrone knew precisely what he had to do. Delgado's time had run out, and tonight was the beginning of his end. Nightfall draped the city skyline in darkness, cloaking Chris Delgado's lavish estate perched high above the urban sprawl. Tyrone stood quietly in the cover of dense foliage overlooking the mansion, carefully observing security patrol patterns through compact binoculars, every muscle in his body tensed in preparation for the inevitable battle ahead. Delgado had hidden behind wealth and power for far too long. Now it was time to face justice, and Tyrone was determined to be the one delivering it. Finding Delgado hadn't been easy. It was Detective Malcolm Hayes who'd provided the critical piece of intel: financial records showing the developer's recent acquisition of the remote estate, a location conveniently secluded, ideal for private meetings away from prying eyes. The careful analysis revealed Delgado's pattern. Whenever the heat intensified in the city, he retreated here, thinking himself untouchable. Tonight, however, Tyrone planned to prove him disastrously mistaken. Carefully concealed by tactical gear, Tyrone moved swiftly along the outer perimeter fence, avoiding the sweeping glare of surveillance cameras. Military training guided his movements, each step precise, each breath measured. He reached the wall surrounding Delgado's compound, swiftly ascending it with practiced ease, landing silently in the shadows inside. Instantly, a guard approached around the corner, flashlight slicing through darkness. Tyrone remained perfectly still, pressed against the stone wall, counting silently until the guard passed close enough. At exactly the right moment, Tyrone moved, locking the man into a sleeper hold, neutralizing him silently and laying him carefully behind dense shrubbery. He retrieved the guard's radio and weapon, disabling the device to prevent reinforcements. Inside the mansion's compound, security tightened sharply. Delgado's paranoia ensured each entrance was heavily patrolled by ex-military contractors. Tyrone moved with stealth and precision, slipping expertly from shadow to shadow. Nearing a side entrance, he found two guards standing in quiet conversation. He tossed a pebble, drawing their attention toward a false threat. As they approached cautiously, Tyrone struck rapidly, disabling both with swift, controlled strikes, quietly pulling their unconscious forms from view. He breached the side entrance carefully, moving quietly down a richly carpeted corridor toward Delgado's private office. But as he approached the ornate double doors, an alarm triggered suddenly, filling the hallway with sharp, urgent tones. Immediately, footsteps thundered toward him from multiple directions, Delgado's remaining guards swiftly converging, their shouts echoing fiercely through corridors. Tyrone took cover behind a nearby marble pillar just as bullets shattered wood and stone around him. Heart racing, he took a deep breath, assessing the tactical situation carefully. "I've got visual. Engage with caution," one guard shouted sharply. Tyrone remained calm, returning fire carefully and deliberately. Using the marble pillar as cover, he expertly disabled the overhead lights with precise shots, plunging the corridor into darkness, instantly shifting the advantage to his favor. Blinded and disoriented, the security team advanced carefully, flashlight beams nervously scanning for Tyrone's position. Using night vision, Tyrone swiftly moved to flank them, delivering precise strikes, disarming and incapacitating each guard one by one, his movements swift and disciplined. Despite being outnumbered, Tyrone's tactical skill and precise combat training gave him the advantage. He landed careful, calculated blows, immobilizing Delgado's security swiftly. The entire estate plunged into chaos as explosions of flashbang grenades shattered windows, their brilliant white light piercing the mansion's gloom, blinding Delgado's security detail and sending them staggering in panicked confusion. Tyrone seized the moment decisively, stepping from the shadows, adrenaline sharpening every sense, combat instincts honed through years of rigorous Navy SEAL training, fully taking command. Two guards stumbled forward blindly through the smoky haze, their eyes watering uncontrollably from the sudden assault of noise and light. Tyrone swiftly moved to intercept them, his movements precise and disciplined. With swift, brutal efficiency, he delivered a sharp strike to the throat of one, instantly dropping him, then spun smoothly, landing a powerful elbow to the other guard's temple, sending him sprawling unconscious onto the marble floor. Another guard appeared through the thickening smoke, raising his weapon hastily, firing wildly in Tyrone's direction. Bullets sliced through the air dangerously close, but Tyrone had anticipated the attack, rolling fluidly beneath the spray, quickly sweeping the guard's legs out from beneath him. As the guard crashed violently onto his back, Tyrone swiftly disarmed him, delivering a crushing blow to render him unconscious. "Intruder in the East Wing!" shouted another guard frantically through his radio, voice trembling with panic. "It's Carter. He's taking us down." From the corner of his eye, Tyrone saw two more security members converging aggressively, guns raised, eyes wide with adrenaline-fueled panic. Without hesitation, Tyrone rapidly closed the distance, striking one guard powerfully in the sternum with an open-palmed strike, dropping him gasping to the floor. The second guard swung wildly, desperation fueling reckless punches. Tyrone easily dodged, seizing the man's arm, twisting sharply until he heard a bone snap loudly. The guard screamed in agony, collapsing helplessly as Tyrone drove his knee forcefully into his opponent's side, silencing the screams instantly. 3 more guards emerged rapidly from a hallway, moving cautiously in tight formation, weapons drawn. They fired aggressively, forcing Tyrone behind temporary cover as bullets slammed violently into furniture and walls. Breathing heavily, Tyrone quickly analyzed his next move, knowing hesitation meant death. He swiftly reached for another flashbang, tossing it expertly into the guards' formation. It detonated sharply, causing them to recoil blindly, completely disoriented. Capitalizing immediately, Tyrone surged forward, disabling each guard methodically. Precise blows delivered with lethal accuracy, rendering them unconscious one by one until only silence remained. He took a brief moment to catch his breath, surveying the wreckage of Delgado's elite security scattered motionless around him. Yet the silence was shattered abruptly when a single guard suddenly lunged from shadows, blade glinting wickedly in dim light. Tyrone instinctively sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blade that sliced dangerously close to his torso. "You're dead, Carter!" The guard snarled aggressively, swinging again wildly, his eyes burning with desperate hatred. Tyrone dodged fluidly, his mind calm amidst chaos, perfectly timing his movements. The guard attacked once more, blade slashing aggressively toward Tyrone's neck. Tyrone swiftly deflected the arm downward, immediately countering with a forceful strike to the guard's jaw, staggering him backward momentarily. Yet the guard, adrenaline-fueled, lunged again, this time stabbing downward with reckless desperation. Tyrone caught the guard's wrist mid-air, twisting brutally until the knife clattered to the floor loudly. Then, without hesitation, Tyrone delivered a powerful knee strike to the guard's chest, driving the breath violently from his lungs. The guard collapsed heavily onto the ground, unconscious, breathing ragged and shallow. The immediate threat neutralized, Tyrone stood straight, panting heavily, sweat dripping from his brow, surveying the chaotic battlefield littered with incapacitated guards around him. Yet, even through the exhaustion, his mind sharpened with renewed purpose. From the nearby room, he heard panicked movement. Delgado had surely heard everything, now fully aware his last line of defense had fallen. Steeling himself, Tyrone took a deep breath, stepping firmly toward Delgado's office door. The battle for justice was almost over, yet the hardest confrontation still awaited behind that final barrier. The polished mahogany doors swung open forcefully as Tyrone stepped boldly into Chris Delgado's luxurious office, breathing steadily despite the fierce battle he'd just endured. Delgado stood frozen behind his ornate desk, eyes wide in sudden fear and disbelief, hands trembling slightly as he realized the full gravity of the situation. His empire, built meticulously upon greed, corruption, and injustice, had finally begun to crumble around him. "You've gone too far, Carter," Delgado hissed bitterly, his voice shaking slightly as he forced confidence into his tone. "Breaking into my home was your final mistake." Tyrone remained silent, eyes locked firmly onto Delgado, assessing every subtle movement. Delgado slowly edged his hand beneath the desk, attempting subtly to press an alarm button hidden beneath the polished surface. Tyrone recognized the movement instantly, lunging swiftly forward, grabbing Delgado's wrist firmly, preventing him from completing the action. "Too late," Tyrone said coldly, eyes narrowed with determination. "No more running, no more hiding behind hired thugs. Tonight, justice catches up." Delgado twisted violently, suddenly fighting with reckless desperation, grabbing a heavy bronze statue from the edge of his desk and swinging it aggressively toward Tyrone's head. Tyrone reacted swiftly, ducking beneath the vicious swing, narrowly evading impact. Delgado roared angrily, lunging forward again, rage and desperation fueling his reckless aggression. "You ruined everything!" Delgado shouted bitterly, swinging wildly again, his lack of skill painfully apparent compared to Tyrone's disciplined training. "Do you know how much I built? How much I sacrificed?" "You sacrificed innocent lives," Tyrone countered sharply, easily evading another reckless strike, his calm voice contrasting Delgado's raw fury. "Families destroyed, people who trusted you. You sold them out." Delgado stumbled forward, off balance, as Tyrone swiftly sidestepped another reckless strike. Tyrone landed a controlled blow against Delgado's ribs, sending the developer stumbling painfully backward, gasping and desperate. But Delgado refused defeat, grabbing a heavy decorative sculpture from the nearby table, swinging it violently toward Tyrone with renewed desperation. Tyrone ducked expertly beneath the wild swing, swiftly countering with a sharp, disciplined strike to Delgado's shoulder, causing the sculpture to clatter noisily across the floor. Delgado staggered backward again, collapsing into his expensive leather chair, breathing heavily, face flushed with rage and humiliation. "You thought your money made you untouchable?" Tyrone said calmly, voice quiet yet firm. "But corruption always collapses, especially when it relies on innocent lives." Delgado, cornered and panting heavily, glared fiercely at Tyrone, eyes narrowed in hatred. "You think this ends with me? People more powerful than you realize rely on me, Carter. You've made enemies you can't even imagine." Tyrone shook his head slowly, voice steady with absolute conviction. "Your threats mean nothing now, Delgado. You destroyed families, lives, my home. Tonight, it stops." With sudden reckless fury, Delgado lunged toward Tyrone again, throwing another brutal swing with the sculpture. This time Tyrone reacted instantly, seizing Delgado's arm mid-strike, twisting it sharply, forcing the weapon from his hand. Delgado cried out sharply in pain, dropping to his knees, utterly defeated, gasping heavily. "Enough," Tyrone said firmly, voice cold yet controlled. "It's over, Delgado. Everything you've done ends now." Yet, even kneeling in defeat, Delgado stared up, defiant, voice trembling bitterly. "You think you've won, Carter? You're nothing. Just another pawn. They'll bury the truth, just like always." Tyrone reached into his tactical vest calmly, pulling out a small recording device, activating it clearly, Delgado's own voice echoing unmistakably through the office. "Tell Cole to silence Hayes immediately. Internal affairs can't investigate. Too many loose ends. Carter must be eliminated." Delgado's eyes widened sharply, sudden fear flickering vividly across his face, realizing the devastating truth. "No, how? Justice finds a way," Tyrone stated confidently, stepping back, finally releasing Delgado, who sank exhausted to the floor. "This recording is everywhere, broadcast live to thousands of people right now. Your money won't bury it this time." Behind them, footsteps echoed urgently in the corridor outside, doors swiftly opening again, revealing Detective Malcolm Hayes entering cautiously. Weapon drawn, he froze momentarily at the scene before him, eyes wide in relief and surprise. "Detective?" Tyrone said calmly, nodding toward Delgado, still collapsed breathlessly upon the floor. "I believe this belongs to you." Hayes moved forward, carefully cuffing Delgado's wrists securely, voice strong yet strained with emotion. "Chris Delgado, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and murder." Delgado glared hatefully, breathing ragged, furious yet utterly powerless. Hayes glanced gratefully toward Tyrone, voice softening slightly. "Thank you, Carter. You've done more than anyone thought possible tonight." Tyrone breathed deeply, feeling exhaustion mix with quiet triumph. Justice needed to be done. Tonight, Delgado finally learns consequences. The first rays of dawn had barely begun to pierce the horizon. A convoy of black SUVs and armored FBI vehicles swept swiftly and decisively through the sleeping streets toward the city's police headquarters. Detective Malcolm Hayes stood waiting anxiously near the front steps of the precinct, his expression grim and focused as he watched the federal agents mobilize swiftly from their vehicles, forming a disciplined perimeter around the building. Special Agent Vivian Locke, a seasoned FBI investigator known for her uncompromising stance against corruption, approached Hayes briskly, nodding curtly toward him, her voice direct and authoritative. "Detective Hayes, the FBI appreciates your cooperation," Locke began firmly. "Internal Affairs provided ample evidence. Now we'll handle the rest." Hayes nodded solemnly, eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and apprehension. They betrayed the badge. "The community deserves to see justice served," Locke signaled sharply to her tactical team, who immediately moved forward, weapons drawn professionally, filing into the precinct through the large double doors. Inside, officers glanced up, startled, confused at the sudden appearance of heavily armed federal agents storming their station. "Nobody move! Hands visible!" shouted the lead agent clearly, swiftly taking command of the stunned room. "This precinct is under federal investigation for corruption and conspiracy. Cooperation will serve your interests." Confusion quickly gave way to nervous compliance as officers raised their hands cautiously, exchanging bewildered, anxious glances. The shock rippled visibly through every face as realization set in. Sergeant Ethan Cole, previously confident and commanding, stepped aggressively forward, eyes blazing angrily. "What's the meaning of this?" Cole demanded furiously, stepping toward the agent aggressively. "This is an outrage!" Agent Locke moved swiftly, stepping firmly into Cole's path, her gaze unflinching. "Sergeant Cole, you're under federal arrest for conspiracy, obstruction, and attempted murder." "You can't do this," Cole snapped defiantly, voice rising dangerously. "This is my precinct." Locke's expression hardened further, unwavering in her response. "Your precinct stopped existing the moment you chose to violate your oath. You're done, Sergeant. Now, turn around." Cole hesitated briefly, glancing desperately toward other officers for support, but they remained frozen, fearful, uncertain, unwilling to stand beside a leader exposed clearly as corrupt. Realizing his isolation, Cole reluctantly turned, allowing Locke to secure his wrists firmly behind him. Agents swiftly moved throughout the precinct, systematically arresting implicated officers, carefully collecting files, hard drives, and records, leaving nothing untouched in their meticulous search for evidence. Each arrest sent shockwaves of disbelief through the building. Officer Tanner, arrogant just hours earlier, sat slumped and humiliated as cuffs clicked sharply around his wrists, finally stripped of his badge and authority. Outside, a crowd had begun gathering, citizens emerging from homes and businesses, drawn by flashing lights and the dramatic unfolding scene. News cameras and journalists rapidly assembled, capturing every arrest clearly and unmistakably, broadcasting to the entire city the shocking reality of corruption exposed openly within their police department. Standing quietly nearby, Detective Hayes watched, emotions heavy in his chest. Sorrow for colleagues who had fallen, anger at their betrayal, but overwhelmingly, relief that justice had finally arrived. He turned, noticing Tyrone standing at the edge of the crowd, eyes focused quietly yet resolutely on the events unfolding. Hayes approached slowly, gratitude clear in his voice. "We couldn't have done this without you, Carter." Tyrone nodded slightly, his voice quiet but strong. "This wasn't just for me. It's for every innocent person hurt by these officers. Justice has to mean something again." As Cole and Tanner were led forcefully from the precinct, cameras flashing brightly, citizens watching in stunned silence, a sense of justice and vindication swept powerfully through the gathered crowd. For the first time in months, the truth stood clear and undeniable. Corruption had been exposed, accountability restored. Locke stepped forward briefly toward the gathered media, speaking clearly into a cluster of microphones. "Today, federal authorities have dismantled an extensive network of corruption involving senior officers of this precinct. Thanks to brave citizens who stood firm, justice prevailed." From the crowd, applause erupted spontaneously, citizens clapping and cheering, emotions running high as months of fear, anger, and injustice finally began giving way to hope and renewal. Tyrone stood silently, allowing the profound moment to settle deeply within him, knowing clearly his actions had helped reclaim justice for his community. Though exhaustion weighed heavily upon him, he felt something more powerful: pride, relief, and gratitude. The corruption and violence of men like Delgado, Cole, and Tanner had finally been brought to an end, thanks to courage, determination, and truth. Now the community, no longer held hostage by fear, could finally begin healing. The collapse of Chris Delgado's empire came swiftly and without mercy. As the FBI dismantled the corrupt police precinct, federal investigators simultaneously descended upon Delgado's corporate headquarters downtown, their arrival swift and decisive, leaving no room for resistance or evasion. Television screens across the city flashed continuously with breaking news updates, capturing scenes of federal agents carrying boxes filled with evidence from Delgado's lavish offices. Financial records, hidden ledgers, and confidential communications were seized, their contents meticulously catalogued and exposed, each page revealing the extent of Delgado's web of corruption and betrayal. The city watched in stunned silence as the seemingly untouchable developer's decades-long reign of influence unraveled publicly and dramatically. Delgado himself, previously arrogant and confident, now sat in a stark interrogation room, stripped of his tailored suit and Rolex watch, reduced to a desperate figure confronting the grim reality of his downfall. Across from him, Special Agent Vivian Locke regarded him coldly, her voice calm but resolute. "Your empire is finished, Mr. Delgado. Bank accounts frozen, assets seized, your influence in this city completely shattered," Locke said firmly, her eyes unyielding. "This goes far beyond bribery and conspiracy. You orchestrated violence, exploitation, and misery for profit." Delgado, exhausted yet defiant, looked up bitterly, voice trembling slightly with anger and frustration. "You think you've ended this by arresting me? I've built connections. Powerful people owe me favors. They'll protect me." Locke shook her head slightly, her voice chillingly firm. "Not this time. Your connections vanished the moment your crimes went public. No one will protect you now. They can't risk exposure. You're alone." Delgado's expression slowly shifted from defiance to uncertainty, then finally into bitter realization. The stark reality of his situation settled over him heavily. His carefully constructed empire, built upon a foundation of fear, deceit, and greed, had collapsed completely, leaving him utterly isolated. Across the city, the news of Delgado's arrest and the dismantling of his criminal enterprise spread quickly, bringing profound relief and hope to neighborhoods devastated by his actions. Victims of forced evictions and falsified criminal charges watched in disbelief as the architect of their misery was finally brought to justice, their long-suppressed voices finally heard clearly. At City Hall, previously supportive politicians hastily distanced themselves from Delgado, their reputations irreparably damaged by their once hidden associations. His extensive network of businesses, built on corrupt property acquisitions and illegal dealings, crumbled rapidly under intense public scrutiny and federal investigations, exposing every fraudulent scheme he'd woven into the fabric of the community. On the street where Tyrone's home had been vandalized and terrorized weeks earlier, neighbors gathered quietly outside their homes, talking softly but urgently. For the first time since Delgado's terror had begun, a powerful sense of unity filled their voices. The FBI raids had given them back their neighborhood, a clear sign that justice still mattered, that corruption, however powerful, could still be defeated. Among them stood Rachel and Tyrone, watching the televised broadcast together. Rachel gently touched her brother's shoulder, her voice filled with quiet pride and relief. "You did this, Tyrone," she said softly, smiling warmly. "Without your courage, Delgado would still be untouchable." Tyrone shook his head humbly. voice calm yet resolute. "I couldn't have done it without you or Detective Hayes. People had to see that fighting back was possible. That justice isn't a privilege, but a right." Delgado's criminal empire had finally collapsed, its ruins left as a powerful testament to what could be accomplished through courage, truth, and unity. In the pale light of a quiet morning, Tyrone stood silently in front of the city police station, pausing briefly before ascending the wide concrete steps. Despite knowing the truth had finally emerged, he still felt an anxious weight upon his shoulders. He'd been labeled a fugitive for weeks, pursued by those sworn to protect the innocent, and even though Delgado's empire lay in ruins, Tyrone understood clearly that justice required one last difficult step. Detective Malcolm Hayes waited for him at the entrance, alongside Special Agent Vivian Locke. Both wore expressions of quiet respect, recognizing Tyrone's courage in voluntarily confronting a system that had tried so hard to break him. "You don't have to do this alone, Carter." Hayes spoke reassuringly, extending a hand toward Tyrone. "Your bravery already proved your innocence." "I know," Tyrone responded calmly, shaking Hayes's hand firmly, gratitude evident in his voice. "But the system needs to see me face it willingly. No one's above the law, not even those who fight to restore it." Agent Locke nodded approvingly, clearly moved by Tyrone's resolve. "We'll be right here with you. The evidence you brought forward is overwhelming. You're not alone anymore." Inside the precinct, Tyrone calmly presented himself, voluntarily surrendering into custody, feeling the curious and wary eyes of officers around him. However, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically since the FBI raid. Officers watched quietly, now fully aware Tyrone was no criminal, but rather a victim and a hero. The legal process moved swiftly. News of Tyrone's self-surrender spread through the city rapidly, further galvanizing public support. The recording he'd captured of Delgado and Cole conspiring to silence him, combined with the FBI's evidence, left no doubt about his innocence. Within days, all charges against Tyrone were formally dismissed, his name finally cleared. Emerging from the courthouse steps under bright sunlight, Tyrone felt a deep relief and quiet triumph. Rachel stood proudly beside him, smiling warmly, surrounded by neighbors and friends who had gathered to support him. A burst of applause erupted spontaneously from the crowd, cheers echoing powerfully, clearly demonstrating how deeply Tyrone's courage had impacted them. "You're free now, Tyrone," Rachel whispered softly, eyes filled with emotion. "You fought for all of us." Tyrone nodded humbly, voice steady, yet filled with gratitude. "We fought together. I couldn't have done it alone." Meanwhile, the legal aftermath continued relentlessly against the corrupt officers who'd betrayed their badge. The trials of Sergeant Ethan Cole and Officer Tanner gripped the community. The courtroom filled daily with residents eager to witness justice. Malcolm Hayes testified courageously against his former colleagues, his powerful words clearly exposing the depth of their betrayal. Cole and Tanner sat silently in the courtroom each day, stripped of arrogance and power, faces hardened yet resigned, forced finally to confront their actions. When the judge delivered the guilty verdicts, sentencing Cole and Tanner to lengthy prison terms, the courtroom erupted in emotional relief, knowing justice had finally prevailed. Outside the courthouse, Detective Hayes spoke firmly to reporters gathered eagerly around him. "Justice won today because good people refused to remain silent." Tyrone Carter reminded us all that one person can make a difference when the truth is on their side. With the trials concluded and justice restored, Tyrone turned his attention back to his home, still scarred by the violent raid that had shattered his sense of security. Yet, as he stood quietly on his damaged porch one bright morning, neighbors arrived spontaneously, carrying tools, supplies, and food, ready to help him rebuild what he'd nearly lost. Over the next few weeks, the community came together, working side by side, reconstructing Tyrone's home piece by piece, their unity symbolic of the strength they'd discovered by facing injustice together. Tyrone worked tirelessly alongside them, humbled and inspired by the generosity, strength, and resolve shown by his neighbors. When the final touches were completed, the rebuilt home stood proudly, stronger than before, representing far more than mere shelter. It symbolized a community reclaimed from fear, standing proudly upon justice and solidarity. Rachel approached Tyrone on the newly rebuilt porch, smiling warmly, eyes bright with hope. "You did more than rebuild your home, Tyrone. You helped rebuild the spirit of everyone here." Tyrone nodded thoughtfully, voice quiet, yet filled with determination and gratitude. "We did it together, Rachel. None of us ever need to stand alone again." Neighbors gathered around, laughter and conversation filling the air, the joyous atmosphere a testament to their victory. They had fought back, reclaimed their lives, and now stood proudly united, stronger than ever. As evening fell gently upon the street, Tyrone gazed out toward the horizon, quietly reflecting on the incredible journey that had led them here. The corruption, violence, and betrayal that had once threatened to destroy everything were now distant memories, replaced by hope, unity, and the knowledge that justice, courage, and truth had triumphed. Tyrone Carter was finally free, not merely of charges, but of fear. His community, once nearly broken, now thrived, knowing clearly they'd taken back what was rightfully theirs. They stood together now, victorious. The days following the trials of Cole, Tanner, and Delgado were filled with change, not just within the justice system, but within the hearts of the people who had long been afraid to fight back. The FBI had uprooted one of the most entrenched corruption rings in the city. But as Tyrone knew, the battle wasn't just about removing a few corrupt men. It was about ensuring the system itself no longer enabled men like Delgado and Cole to rise again. Detective Malcolm Hayes stood at the front of a packed City Hall meeting, facing not only fellow officers, but members of the community who had been victims of the department's betrayal. Some were still skeptical, some angry, but all of them had the same question. What now? The arrests were just the beginning. Hayes addressed the room, his voice steady, unwavering. For too long, corruption was allowed to thrive because no one wanted to challenge it. That ends here. New oversight measures are being implemented, and officers involved in past raids will be investigated thoroughly. We have to ensure this never happens again. Tyrone sat near the back of the crowded hall, arms crossed, listening carefully. Though he respected Hayes for the risks he had taken, he wasn't yet convinced the system could truly change. He had seen what power and unchecked authority could do, how easily people in uniform could turn into enforcers for criminals like Delgado. When the meeting concluded, Hayes found Tyrone outside, standing silently beneath the city streetlights, watching as people filed out of the hall with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "You don't think this will last?" Hayes said, standing beside him. Tyrone exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening before he answered. "People like Delgado aren't the disease, Hayes. They're just symptoms of a system that allows men like him to exist. You think a few firings and new rules will fix that?" Hayes looked at him thoughtfully. "No, but it's a start, and I'm not letting up. The department will change, whether it wants to or not." He paused before adding, "Because of you, people are listening now. You gave them the proof they needed to demand real change." Tyrone glanced over at Hayes, his expression unreadable. He had spent years believing the only way to survive was to fight alone, to trust no one, especially not the system that had turned against him so easily. And yet, he couldn't deny that something had shifted. People had seen what corruption looked like in broad daylight. They had risen against it, and Hayes, despite being part of that same broken system, had fought for the truth. "I didn't do this for the system," Tyrone said finally, his voice quiet yet firm. "I did it because no one else was going to, because people deserved justice, and they got it." Hayes responded, "Because you didn't back down." Tyrone nodded slightly but remained silent. The system might never be perfect, and he would never blindly trust it again, but he knew his fight had mattered. He had forced the truth into the light. He had given people the courage to speak out, to fight back. And that, more than anything, was victory enough. Hayes extended his hand. This isn't over. It never is. But we'll keep pushing. For a long moment, Tyrone considered the offer. Then he reached out and shook Hayes's hand firmly. No more running, Tyrone said quietly. If they want to rebuild this city, they better mean it. As Hayes nodded, the city around them hummed with new energy. The people had fought back, and they had won. Tyrone Carter had changed the course of history, not just for himself, but for an entire city that had once been afraid to stand. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.